Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. Hope you're having a wonderful day. You're listening to or watching the Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Tersh. Today, we're going to flip the script a little bit. I have Wesley Stone with me on the show, and he's going to ask me a few questions. We've been talking a little bit beforehand, and I'm super excited to have this conversation. And also, I honestly want to learn about Wesley's experience as he's not an HVAC company. So it's really cool for us to mix and mingle and shoot ideas off of each other. But with that being said, welcome to the show, Wesley.
Thanks, Tersh. I really appreciate you having me on. Hope to glean a little bit of insight into, a little bit more about your story and what's been going on with you and how you got to this point through the eyes of a fan. I kind of stumbled upon your podcast recently. I really like it. I think it's valuable. Really have enjoyed listening to it. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool, man. So first, before we get started with your questions for me, tell us a little bit about you and your history and a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, we grew up in that generation. You and I are close to the same age. Computers were being forced down our throat as kind of the first generation. And I knew right away that wasn't going to fit for me. Had no idea what I was going to do, but felt very strongly about being self-employed. I like to say I was an entrepreneur before it became a fad.
Yeah.
So I dropped out of college after about 5 minutes and started a car washing business. And then years went by and it turned into me starting a half dozen other businesses that were similar. That's cool. I learned hard knocks on most of my lessons along the way. I started my first carpet cleaning business when I was 22 in Middle Georgia. Ran that for about 5 years, made a little bit of money, mismanaged my money. Ended up selling it, which might be a strong word. I basically sold my equipment, said I was never going to do that again. Flash forward to the recession in 2008, I was bartending and struggling to carry my portion of the bills with my girlfriend. In that, things were ugly in 2008, 2009, and I just had no idea what I was going to do. I was getting close to age 30, and I said, I know how to clean carpet. So I borrowed my girlfriend's student loan money, bought a minivan with 200,000 miles on it, and put a portable machine in, and went back to doing the thing that I swore I'd never do again. That was 11 years ago. Have, a pretty solid business now, built on a reputation in the Raleigh area. Have 9 employees that I've been very protective over, provide for them and their families. And, that's, I think, one of the big motivating factors for me. Besides just being self-employed, I always wanted to run a business that, created jobs and helped families get by, not just minimum wage employment. So I'm living my dream every day.
Sweet. Cool. I love it. That's exciting. If you're in the Raleigh area, what's the name of your business and how do people get to use your services?
Yeah, it's Carpet Pro Cleaners. We're pretty much straight ahead steam cleaning service. We only service about a 25-30 mile radius. Our shop is in Cary, just outside of Raleigh. You can find us at carpetprocleaners.com. And you will quickly see that our reputation precedes us.
Nice. And we spoke a little bit beforehand because you came on firing questions at me, and I love that too because what it does is it makes me realize that I don't share with our audience enough about our story and our success stories and our failures and struggles. It's easy to share wins. It obviously it's not that easy. I don't do it that well, but it's really hard to share struggles. But one of the things that you mentioned and you asked me, and I thought was a very valuable question, was, why TriStar and Service Emperor? And I said, TriStar is a low margin, high volume. Service Emperor is a high margin, low volume company. And I've even mentioned this before on different podcasts and gotten some real major, slack from people. And they're like, you're the people that ruin our industry with this, low margin, high volume stuff. That's, you're the hacks in the industry and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, I'm not. And I'm 100% want you to understand this, that there's a client for every person. And while you think that, if someone's cheap, they can't use you as if they're cheap and they don't want to spend money, they're a client for someone else. And, they're not going to use you whether you talk them into it or not. And if you do talk them into it, that's where buyer's remorse, bad reviews, and everything else comes into play. And as a vendor, as a contractor, I don't want that on my conscience. I don't want to feel bad because I've talked someone into using my services when they really didn't need them or couldn't afford them. I guess maybe I have a conscience, and the person that was complaining about this doesn't have a conscience. Whereas TriStar is very much your property managers. Like, there's a reason why they don't want to spend money, and it's not because they are just the devil and have they're just cheap and they're just trying to screw people over. That's not the case at all. There's a reason behind their method, and that's why TriStar is that way. Now, TriStar doesn't come into a house where everybody else has quoted $15,000 for a system replacement and they come in at $5,000. That's not how TriStar works. Typically, if TriStar goes into an affluent neighborhood, they're going to pass that lead on to us. And the same with us. If we go to if a property manager of Section 8 housing comes to us and calls us, and we're probably not going to be a fit. You're going to get frustrated with us. We're going to get frustrated with you. So we pass that lead on to TriStar because they're just built differently. They have very little overhead. The vans with TriStar, the equipment is older stuff. We pay cash for it. It's going to be a 5 to 8 year old van that we purchase, for $5,000 to $10,000 versus a $50,000 van that we purchase with Service Emperor, because I need a van that's black to get from the get-go, that's fully wrapped with a $5,000, $6,000 wrap, and has, that is the perception when you pull up in somebody's driveway. And whether it's good or bad, perception is reality. If I pull up in a 10-year-old van, and I understand if you keep a clean 10-year-old van, because I did that, so you couldn't tell that it was a 10-year-old van. But the traditional 10-year-old van, you have the wrap, quote unquote wrap on it, is just like your logo on a white van, just like every other vehicle out there. You don't stand out. You didn't spend $4,000 on getting your wrap designed and your logo designed by professionals. You put the two together and you're like, I can see why he charges $15,000 and I can see why he can make money at $5,000. And so when you're listening to this, I hope that you understand. Just take a second and think, okay, I get it. Or at least I'll have an open mind to the fact that, yes, if I go against someone who is a lot cheaper than I am on their invoice, they could be actively going out of business, or they could be set up like TriStar, where they have to do that change out, and they're not going to change plenums. They're not going to, change all these other things. If the secondary drain pan looks fine, they're going to keep it there. As long as they disclose that to the homeowner, that's where they will save their money, and they'll get that job done in 6 hours versus a 12 to 18 hour job that would take us to do for $15,000. And then TriStar might not have a warranty. And there's a reason why they're cheaper. And then if you're a consumer listening to this, there's a reason why it's $15,000, and this one here can do it for $5,000 or $6,000 for the same box that they're putting in. Because with TriStar, we do a 10-year warranty of parts and labor, and with Service Emperor, we do a 10-year parts and labor warranty. And TriStar, it's not a taillight warranty, but it's pretty much the minimum warranty that can be provided. And just knowing that I own two different companies and they're not apples to apples. So that's one of the things. And I love how you asked me about that, because you even mentioned that there's a lot of people in that, low margin category that you'd love to be able to serve still, but you can't, because once you get into this other market, it is impossible to serve both. And I don't care who you are. If I took one of my service experts from Service Emperor and I put them in a Section 8 housing and said, you can't spend more than 15 minutes here, we have to charge, like, we got to get it and go, you have to, they would be like, that goes against everything you've ever taught me, because you've taught me I need to spend 2 hours in this house. I need to inspect everything in this home, because you need to look at the electrical panel. You need to look at the water heater. You need to look at the AC unit. You need to inspect everything in this home, because these people care about their comfort. This person here cares about the ticket. They don't want more than $150, maybe $200 ticket price. Whereas this company, these homeowners over here, they're okay with a $1,500 ticket, And so it's if I put a Service Emperor technician into a TriStar situation, they go berserk. And the same goes with, if I put a TriStar technician in a Service Emperor situation, they would just fall on their face with experience. And both of them know air conditioning the same.
Yeah. Excuse me. I think you did a really good job of explaining that. I asked you that, and I'll add one thing to it. I asked you that because I think that's really cool, and I've always wanted to do that. And I told you that I started where most all of us start, from the ground up, and you're catering to, you're basically doing anything at any time for any amount of money. You're starting in at entry level, and for no other reason than pure business and numbers and wanting to provide the best job possible. We've worked our way up that ladder of becoming a more specialty business, to the point to where that's kind of the environment that commands a lot of our meetings now. It's like, how can we be more niche, and how can we be more specialty? And I've often daydreamed about running another business that caters to, that clientele that we started on. And the thing I'll add to it is, for me personally, on a very personal level, dealing with a super high end, extremely affluent community or client base is great for business, but on a personal level, like, it doesn't speak to me. I really enjoyed working with people, in that lower bracket. They seem to be more appreciative on a whole as well. I mean, I miss, saving the day with, a mom holding a baby and the carpet's just totally trashed. I mean, you made their week, and you just don't get those same experiences often with the other clientele. So I think you explained it. I've heard criticisms like that before, and I can imagine, but I think, by and large, that's people that aren't giving it a lot of thought.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there, 100%.
Well, I'll just jump into it. I guess first and foremost, I'd like to start with a couple of basic questions about, one is, was there a critical moment or something that got you motivated or pushed you over the edge to start the podcast?
So I love the podcast story. It's one of those things where the more I replay it in my head, the more I'm like, wow, the chances and the happenstance of this happening is just wild. So Brian Orr, he's a good friend of mine now. Back 2017, Brian was doing this thing on his show. So Brian has a podcast, wildly successful podcast called HVAC School Podcast, and it's very technical. And a lot of what he talks about goes right over my head. And I just enjoy listening to it because he's just an easy guy to listen to. And he has some amazing guests, Jim Bergman and Bill Spone. We've become really good friends. I've become friends with a lot of his guests, which is amazing. Well, he decided that he was going to do a 3-week long, a month-long session on business or something to that effect. Anyways, he had me on the show a couple times, and we talked business aspect, because with TriStar, even though we are a low margin, high volume company, we still were growing between 90 and 120% year over year from the time we started in 2014 until 2017, coming up to 2018. At that time, we were growing fast. For a company like that, we got to where we had 4,600 clients under us in that short span of time. Obviously a lot of property management companies and apartments and stuff. But so Brian had me on his show and we talked business. That's all we talked was business. And then I don't know why, but it was just one of those things where I said, hey, at the exact same time, almost, it was Brian. I reached out to Brian and said, hey, Brian, if you ever wanted to start a business podcast, I'd be more than happy to help out in any way I could. And at the same time, he was starting a network called the Blue Collar Roots Network. And he was like, perfect timing, because I was already going to reach out to you and I wanted you to do your own business podcast in this network. I was like, okay, cool. Like, so, cause we had a bunch of other buddies like Brent Ridley and Billy Noth. They were doing the Tool Pros podcast where they talk about tools and stuff like that. And so we're all going to do this network thing together and cross pollinate and promote each other. And so we did that in 2017. And it was one of those things where I was nervous, and Brian came on and basically interviewed me the first probably 4 episodes. And then he taught me how to do the production side of things. And then after about a year, we kind of disbanded the network. We're all still great buddies. But it was one of those things where we just weren't cross pollinating, and we kind of really went into our own niches. And so we all started doing our own production and stuff like that. And so Brian, he really got me into it and taught me how to do it. And it's kind of like blossomed from there. And my whole thought process was like, I want to give back to the community that gave me so much. And that's the main reason why I don't have sponsors on the show. And like every now and then I'll let somebody sponsor an episode here or there. And because they're another small business trying to get their, spread the message and stuff like that. And most of the times I just do that in trade of whatever their services are, because I really believe in what they do. And
so that resonates. And I mean, I can appreciate that. I told you when I first wrote to you that, I mean, I'm as avid a podcast listener, I think, as you can be. It's replaced, what used to be a lot of music I listened to. Yep. I told you right off the bat, and, I haven't had the opportunity to listen to your whole library, but I was getting value out of, several episodes right off the bat. And there's just that, and I understand, without being critical of any one person. I mean, people are trying to put out content, but a lot of times when you're searching for the business podcast, I find that it's either hyper repetitive stuff or a lot of fluff. Sometimes both of them combined. And I felt like that was absent. You're very down to earth, and it comes through in your podcast, with your conversations, and certainly not all of them, but I feel like there's a lot to be learned from yours. And that's, I think, driving my motivation, especially when I'm searching for anything business related, is what can I take away?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, because sometimes I wonder if I should have more fluff in the shows, if I should have, you know what I mean?
Well, I'm sure there's an audience for that too, like we talked about.
Yeah, there is. And so like Chris Yano, great buddy of mine, he's out in the West Coast and does digital net marketing and stuff. He's really closely connected to Gary Vee. And I used to listen to Gary Vee like it was going out of style. But then I got to where I was like, man, Gary has his place, but it gets very repetitive. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I'm struggling here, man. Like, tell me something different. I just heard that same answer yesterday or day before. But that's part of his content, is like, just get as much of it out there as possible. And repeat. And like, I get it. I understand totally. I know that I don't like being repeated to. And so I don't like repeating myself. And I guess that's kind of why I've stayed away from that thought process. Yeah.
Cool. Hey, if I meant to tell you this before, but if you draw a blank on any of the questions, just give me a heads up and we can move right along.
Oh no, I'm full of useless knowledge.
Okay. Well, I got one for you. What, just off the top of your head, what would be a key point of advice that you would give to your 23-year-old self?
23-year-old self. Ooh, that's a good one. Fire faster. That's a big one. That's Then also don't stay away from saving money by doing it yourself. Pay someone else to do it. It goes back to the conversation that we had about, not having money and then all of a sudden having money. And so it's like, all right, well, I don't want to spend this money because I want to I want to do it and learn it. And I say that with a grain of salt though, because like now I know production on podcasts, and otherwise I could have paid somebody to do it, but I know it and I can do it instantly. I can do Photoshop because I was cheap at one point, and now I know Photoshop like the back of my hand, and I enjoy it. So it's some of that cheapness turned into a passion projects, but at the same time, there's other things where I should have hired out quicker, hiring people faster, spend money on marketing, and track. And that's one of the things is like learn the KPIs, learn how to track the KPIs, and have those tough conversations with firing people, and that includes firing vendors as far as those marketing companies that just aren't working out.
Yeah. Okay. What motivates you? And I know this changes over time, but what motivates you, in business, and have you had struggles to stay motivated? Do you have any like techniques or things you tell yourself or practice to, or does it all just come to you? Or
oh no, it's all natural. No, I'm just kidding. So I could go with the cliche, family motivates me. And while it is true, very, very much true, it really, I love it whenever my kids just say, I want to do the same thing you're doing, when I grow up. And while I know that they so I have 4 kids, 4 little ones, and they all have their own specialties. Like they're really good at this, that, and the other. I'm pretty sure 2 of them will end up either being physicians or they'll be in the medical realm because they geek over that kind of stuff. As long as I can lead them properly through their adolescence. But then I have other ones who are just natural born salesmen, and that's not me either. So I'd love to see them, develop that, but then to hear them listening to what I say and them picking up on those little cues and things. I think that that's a huge motivator for me. Not only that, being able to give back. I want to leave a legacy. And a great friend of mine, his name is Mike McAllowitz. He wrote a couple books, Profit First, Fix This Next. And in Fix This Next, he had me in the book. And one of the problems that I had prior to doing the Fix This Next process was that I was trying to leave a legacy before I built a strong foundation. And I really want to leave a legacy. I want to be able to give back to the community. Philanthropy is pretty strong in my mind and heart. And I can't do that if I don't have a super strong foundation. So it's like that pyramid looking. And so if I don't create that strong foundation, I'll never be able to do philanthropy like I really want to do. And so it's like just knowing that every day, like, got to build a strong foundation or else I'll never be able to do, those things that I want to do. I'm not really I don't want to go on vacation. I'm I'm almost a hermit. Philanthropy is kind of what really helps my wife and I both.
Yeah, I totally understand. I mean, I had that in mind when I started my business. I mean, there's, not really anything environmentally friendly about the carpet cleaning industry. Yeah. And I was determined to, cultivate new methods and new ways and a new way of thinking, at least, even if within my own company, about what we can do and change. And you're exactly right. I mean, that can easily get bumped into the back seat or the trunk, if you haven't done what you said and laid a strong foundation. In fact, we're still dealing with that today, and it's an ongoing struggle.
Oh yeah.
Shifting gears a little bit, recently, for a variety of reasons, it's came to my mind to put dash cams. I haven't talked to you about this, but
Yeah.
I'm leaning very strongly into putting dash cams. And we've had a couple demos with companies and about dash cams and GPS. I've had different GPS systems along the way, but one of the pitches we had recently was about the new AI function that I guess Amazon uses, where it's reading facial features and
Oh, wow.
basically gauging driver distraction.
Okay.
And,
Yeah.
and ironically, off the cuff, I was working with one of my techs a couple of weeks ago, and he was bringing this up and talking about how crazy and invasive, it was for Amazon to be doing that. And it's funny because I immediately felt this conflict because
Right.
the business owner in me, loves that idea, but on a personal level, like I still want the dash cam. I'm debating still about the AI function, but I just wanted to throw that out there to you and see if do you guys use dash cams?
No, we don't. And it's only because it's on my list of things to do and it has not been done yet.
Right.
As a business owner, we all know we all have that list. And one of the things is, so we beat into our guys' heads like safety first, safety first, safety first. That's one of our core values. With us, we have 4 core values, and every meeting. So I was telling you before, we have a meeting on Tuesdays and Thursdays. They're virtual Zoom meetings. Beginning of a meeting, everybody round robin core value, and then they're gonna share how they used the core value over the past week. And so safety first is one of those core values, and integrity. Well, safety above all, integrity first. That's 2 of our core values. And so for you to lie or lie of omission type stuff is a big deal for us. And all of our core values are fireable offenses. So if you break a core value, then it's a fireable offense. And if you're texting and driving, we understand the temptation. We understand the need or the desire to run that yellow light. And it's one of those things where it's like, if you do it, that is a huge rolling billboard. You don't think about that. You just get so comfortable driving that van around, and you don't think about the fact that this billboard is going to like either make a great impression on someone or make a terrible impression on someone. And you have the power to make or break Service Emperor by driving basically impaired by texting and driving, or driving recklessly by running through red lights or yellow lights and stuff like that. And so it's not something that I say no to. It's more of something that I haven't done yet because I haven't found the provider that I trusted. And I have actually interviewed a couple myself, and I've talked to some guys in my small group where we have we talked what they've used and other stuff. And one of the guys, he uses, don't quote me on this, Verizon, and their products were no charge, and they came in and installed them at no additional charge either. And it was like $15 a month. And I was like, man, that's a no brainer. Because the ones that I've used in the past, they were just the OBD2 port GPS connectors. So then the guys, if they really wanted to be sneaky, they could just slip that thing out. And yes, I'd get the alarm, but by the time I got the alarm, they've already done what they were going to do. Whereas these other ones are hardwired in. So yeah, I don't see, the thing about it is that's my $50,000 investment with $15,000 or $20,000 worth of equipment in the back of it. That's my stuff that I've invested and allowed you to drive, and you drive, and especially the guys that drive their vehicles home with them each day. You have to understand that's a way that I'm going to protect my investment, just like you put cameras around your house to protect your investment.
Yeah. I think you have to draw hard lines on that too. I mean, I remember in the early days, I used to let some of my technicians smoke cigarettes in the van. And then one day I was just like, this is ridiculous. Like, it says no toxin cleaners on the side of our van, and then you're blowing cigarette smoke out. And and I smoked for 15 years. Like, but
The thing about
I
it
was like,
is
you can't.
I have that conversation with guys, and it's a tough conversation to have with someone who's been smoking for 15 years or 20 years and stuff. And to me, I'm like, I don't care how much you don't think you smell like cigarette smoke. If you smoke in the van, you will always smell like cigarette smoke when you get out.
Yep.
The van smells like cigarette smoke. Like a year later, as soon as it gets hot, it smells like cigarette smoke.
Headliners all burned up.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm with you there. I had to do a hard no. Cannot smoke on client's property, and you cannot smoke in a van. And so, if you're going to take a smoke break, you have to go to a convenience store, gas station, and take you a smoke break. And
yeah, looking back, I can't believe that I even allowed it. At the time, I think it was me and two other guys, but still, like, it's definitely a no-go. Yeah. So if any listeners want to reach out to Tersh if they have a strong suggestion about the dash cam or GPS thing, Samsara was the most recent one that we've engaged with, but I'm still in the decision-making process. It's just, it's one of those things, and we talked a lot before the podcast about, coming up and things that have changed over time. And if you'd asked me 2 or 3 years ago, it wasn't even on my list. I hadn't thought about it, but I think you can get reductions in insurance rates, and there's just a variety of benefits that I think you just have to present it the right way to your team and say,
exactly.
like, hey, this is for the good of everyone.
Well, the thing about it, part of it is you have to be very careful that it doesn't ruin the culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, all right, big brother's watching me constantly. Here's something that for anybody that's listening, and maybe this will help you as well, that I learned, and it wasn't even my company. I was talking to a really good friend of mine, one of my best, closest friends. He's in the HVAC industry. He's now a regional manager for Train. And he's on a national level now. It's crazy how this guy has accelerated his career. But he worked for an air conditioning company as a sales guy, a comfort specialist. And he hated doing paperwork in a client's driveway. So like afterwards, he would have to fill out all these forms and stuff. So he'd pull off to like an abandoned parking lot, and he would do his paperwork there. And if he idled more than 5 minutes, dispatch would text him and say, "Can't idle the vans, no idling vans." And they're like, "What?" Like literally, I pulled up, I'm filling out your paperwork, and you're telling me I can't sit here and idle. I have to turn my van off to do the paperwork. And so it was like a constant big brother watching type scenario.
I've heard a similar story to that.
And it's not a big deal. I mean, especially for me, like for me, I'd rather the guys sit in the van and cool off than have a heat stroke. And now all of a sudden I'm down a technician and I have a workman's comp claim. So yeah, I would caution people to be very careful with who you give permission to watch that.
Yeah, well, I sat down with my manager and talked through that about like, hey, do we think how do we think everyone's going to react, and on an individual basis? But at the end of the day, like the implications of what it means is like inevitably, if you're super, super against it, you're probably not a good fit for our team anyway. Like my best techs are not going to have an issue with, or you spend time being too negative in the band, talking trash about other employees or whatever, just like the things that eat a business from the inside out.
That cancer.
And hopefully after a while, I would assume, even for myself, like you forget that it's there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
For new guys coming in, it will have always been there. This is a loaded question or a tough question, but I love getting in these conversations with talking shop with any business owner. But what's a couple of, looking back over your business career, what are some regrets or things that have stuck with you about you wish you'd have gone a different way, made a different decision?
Investing in certain people, I regretted doing it, but hindsight's 2020. With training, especially if you bring in somebody who's green that's from outside the industry, it's one of those things where what happens if I train them and they leave? Well, what happens if you train them and they stay? If you don't train them and they stay, it's one of those kind of conversations. But then it's like, dang, I trained them, and then 2 months later they're gone. I spent $5,000 on this class and this course, and they're gone now. It's tough to hold someone to that, hold them accountable for it. You like to be able to say, hey, look, you're responsible for this course if you leave or whatever. But in reality, I mean, I've taken the small claims court, I guess, if I wanted to, but it's not really worth it in my time, in my opinion. A few other things would be like not investing. So you need the core. It's a core four. So you need a CFO. You need a good or CPA. You need a good CPA. You need a good business lawyer. You need a good coach, and then a tax. When I say business lawyer, I mean a tax lawyer, a tax and business lawyer, and then your business coach. And I'm leaving one off there, but there's another one there too. But trying to think through mine. But anyways,
I think you've named all mine.
Not having my CPA early enough, not getting my CFO early enough was a huge regret. And it's so cheap now. And maybe back when I was originally not getting them or bringing them on board, it was more expensive back then. But now that these professionals have learned how to divvy up their time, I have a CFO that only charges me $800 a month because they're not my full-time CFO. They're the CFO of several companies. And so that's a really cool thing that can be done now. And so, and then my lawyer, I didn't have a lawyer, and I signed a contract with a book, and it's not a book, a price book. And it's really negligible, the amount of money, but it was more the principle of this guy was a scam artist, and I didn't realize it when we signed the contract. And I ended up suing him, but he got me on some of his fine print, and I was like, this little sucker.
What did you sign? What was the service that you signed up for?
It was a price book, and growmyhvac.com, and he's since been gone out of business, rightfully so, because all of his information was from back in the early 90s or late 90s, early 2000s. And I was like, once I you couldn't get deep in the weeds until you signed the contract.
Yeah.
Once I got into it, I'm like, this is crap that I've learned 10 years ago. Like, you're selling me the snake oil stuff. And so it pissed me off, and it wasn't much money. It was like $100 a month, but $1,200 whenever you're first starting out that's a lot of money. You know what I mean? And so, I should have spent $1,200 on a good lawyer, honestly, and would have been great. But not having the core four quick enough, that's probably my biggest regret.
Yeah, I heard on one of your recent guests, and you were talking about that this example came up of, like, she was kind of describing some of the common mistakes and about, like, putting together a manual, and like it brings up one of my darkest memories. My brother, who's in a totally different industries and finance and consulting, he came through town when I was in my early years of starting this business, and he's just brilliant in a totally different way. We're very, very different thinkers, but I always lean on him for advice and input. And he was like, you really need to put together a manual. And I had like 2 employees at the time. Mm-hmm. And I remember, like, having a brief argument where I was like, and this is exactly what your guest said, like, what I'm going to spend all this time on a manual when it's me and 2 guys, even though I intended on growing. But looking back on how stupid that was of me to even think like that. And, as I'm writing the manual 5 years later, realizing how useful it would have been. And it's something that we constantly work on and revise now. And I every time I work on it, I wish we'd started it years before, when my brother said that, because I couldn't understand the value. And I just had this negative connotation of, like, being slid a 3-ring binder when you start a job, and that gets thrown in the back seat and never opened. And that's not being very creative in today's time as far as creating a manual. I mean, we're very proud of ours. I mean, I've certainly had a lot of employees that had their hand in creating it, probably more than me at this point. but it's just a super, super valuable asset that I didn't even have until a few years ago.
Yeah, that creating the employee handbook, and that's a really big thing, because a lot of people, like if you reach out to like an ADP for payroll and stuff like that, they'll tell you you don't really need one until you get 15 employees or something like that. And I think they're going more based on the law. You know, like once you get to this many employees, you're supposed to have one or whatever. But like you said, there's so much uncertainty that's just solved with an employee handbook or in just a handbook in general. And then as long as you revise it and you don't create it in 1990 and it's the same one that's sitting here on what do you mean you don't understand that policy? Here's this handbook from 1990 and that was our policy back then, and it's like, it's gotta stay up with the times type stuff.
One of the things I've been trying to personalize ours a little bit more, because I've been told a few times over the years, and especially as the business grows and you get, that space between you and the employees on the ground starts to, it increases over time, and, been reminded to get everything that's in my head, all my experience and, all of my, whether it's the techniques or just the way I approach things, the DNA of the company, like it was always me communicating it to other people. Yeah. But as much as you can get that out, and I'm still, working on this all the time, as much as you can get that out and into a training manual or, a continuing education manual, the company is going to benefit from that, assuming that, you've built a solid company and now, your DNA is part of it.
Do you have intentions of putting that on a video, or is it always going to be in print?
Well, like we talked about, right now it's in print, and we kind of pulled from that a few tests. We started testing about 18 months ago, like at your week 1, week 2, week 3 mark, which has been helpful as well, because it shows you how invested people are in actually caring about learning the craft. We haven't incorporated any video into it yet, but that's one of our big ticket items. Like the to-dos is to start filming those training videos and just starting with, whatever we can and putting that together as much as we can. I mean, my brain goes wild when I think about that. I'm imagining that we'll be able to, not only replace some stuff that's in there in text now. I mean, obviously nobody wants to read a bunch of text. I mean, it's just not how people learn now, including myself. So I'm looking forward to revamping the manual. I mean, most certainly we will get started on that this year and incorporating more videos and just, and pairing them together, even if it's just a collage of a few photos and, documenting how this is done, or, what it's supposed to look like or whatever, and that goes from equipment, like one of our issues, one of the pain points for me, and I catch myself, I'm a victim of all of these stereotypical traps and mistakes that business owners make. And it's just so funny to look back. And even when you're warned about them, you fall into it. And I'll catch myself like, I'm the only one that does repairs on equipment because, I get frustrated. I don't want to teach somebody. And sometimes the repairs only happen so infrequently that by the time they happen, the person that I've taught the repair to last year can't remember anything about it.
Yeah.
But that's just a really terrible outlook on, like, I'm just going to do it because, it's easier this way.
It's so easy to do that worker's mentality, that technician mentality. And that goes back to the E-Myth revisited. Michael Gerber talking about you have to have you're either a technician, a manager, or an entrepreneur. And, it's very difficult to have all three of those as your personality trait. But if you're not careful, whenever you transition from the technician to the manager, from the manager to the entrepreneur, that when you transition, it's easy to fall back into that technician's role because it's just easier to do it than to delegate it. And one of the things that was really cool at the group that we went to last week, it's a little bit different because it's obviously the frequency of repairs is different, but on their drain machines, they require their technicians to rebuild the drain. They build their own drain machine before graduating from their university. Before they can do that on their own, they have to be able to rebuild that drain machine themselves. That way, if anything fails out in the field, they know how to fix it,
Right.
instead of having to come back to the shop or whatever. And I thought that was a really cool concept, because our duct cleaning machine is that way. It's probably similar to yours, where it's like you something breaks in like a year.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do I fix this? And it's like, I don't know, let's YouTube it, and we'll figure it out.
Yes, we've all been there. I mean, it's hard for me to try, I do my best to try and keep up with technological advances. And we were joking around earlier, but like, I mean, I have technicians now that when I tell them, when I first started cleaning carpets, it was common to be pulled over on the side of the road, flipping a map around, because that's the only way you knew where you were going.
Yeah, exactly.
And they just look at you like with bewilderment. So I'm a little slow to that, but like, even making use in recent years of Google Docs and Google Slides. I mean, that's effectively what how our manual is put together, but there's so much versatility in that. And I've been fortunate enough to have a couple people come through and that are on the team now that, just run circles around me with that, which helps. So now it's the process of getting out,
delegating it to those people.
What do I know? What's the culture of this business, or what's our process like, and things like that. Do you have any routines or rituals that stick out in your mind, or that, new or old, like stuff that you do every day, business or personal?
Yeah. So in order for us to do what we do, my wife, I say we, and I mean Julie and myself, we live and die by our calendar. So our calendar, I don't know if you can see this on the screen, but it syncs up together. And so Julie and I mean, everything is instantly synced together. I'm an automation junkie. I use Zapier for everything. Like if it's anything that can be repeated, it has to be repeated, it's done by Zapier. And Calendly sends out and creates even like the recording in this Zoom call, and like it all does it automatically. So, but one of the things that we have to do is each night look at our schedule for the morning before the next day, and then there's a method of naming off 9 things that we do that we're going to do the next day. 9 things that we feel like we have to get done the next day, and then out of those 9, we'll take 6 of them. And so, okay, now we have to take that list down to 6, and then we have to take that list down to 3, and then out of those 3, we have to take that down to 1. And so that one thing that must get done, and typically that's done first thing in the morning, because that's our most important thing to get done, our most important task to get completed. But with that being said, the way that my weekly schedule works is Mondays and Fridays, I work on the business. So that's the days I create policies and procedures. I'm learning about the business, that type of stuff. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I work in the business. So like that's implementing those policies and procedures. That's the days I have my meetings with my team. And then on Wednesdays is podcast day. Also on Tuesdays and Thursdays, that's my networking days. So if you have a networking event, we're really big in the networking. I'm the president of the Small Business Chamber. I'm on the executive board of Buy Local Savannah. We recently were on the executive board for Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and so we do that. That's part of our philanthropy, aspect. But if they have a networking event that's on a Monday night, nope, can't go. Only Tuesday and Thursday. So it's an easy way to say no.
Yeah, I've heard you talk a little bit about that before. Did it take you a while to get into that groove? I mean, was it hard to make that transition?
No, it was a flip of the switch. It was so we have life coaches. Julie and I, we have life coaches that are business. So they're Joe and Joanne, and Joe and Joanne, Joe and John and Joe. John, he's an executive business coach, and that's what he's always done. And then Joanne, she's been she's a psychiatrist. She's by trade, she's a psychiatrist, but they're spouses, and they eventually just joined forces and became life coaches, and they specialize in business owners. And so we started meeting with them like once a month, like 3 years ago. And it was one of those things, like we're at wit's end, like we're stressed out. Like this isn't normal, or maybe it is normal, but we need somebody to tell us how to work through all this stress and stuff. And it wasn't like, like we're punching holes in wall stress. It was just like our kids are like our kids are sensing our stress, like, and that's not something we want. And so we reached out to them, and one of the things that they really honed in on us was, your life is like a rubber band. And if you've ever stretched a rubber band so far, eventually it loses elasticity. So it doesn't ever come back. So we would always like, okay, what can we fit in basically our rubber band? And we stretch it out. Like, what can we fit inside of our rubber band, And then, because we never said no, it was so hard for us to say no to anybody, because we're just givers, both of us. It's a character flaw for both of us. And they said, eventually that rubber band, you're just going to go so large that it never comes back, and you can't connect with each other anymore because you're saying yes to everyone else so much. And I was like, dang. And then John, he's like, and eventually what happens when you stretch a rubber band so far, after it's done dry rotted and lost elasticity, it snaps. And that's when you get divorced. And I was like, well, hell, thanks, John. You know what I mean? And so it's like, and so we had a process. We had a lot of like brainstorm sessions where it's like, what can we say no to? And it got to the point to where it's like, okay, you must say no first, and then you guys tell me on why I should say yes. And one of the things was, we both get stressed out about laundry, but neither of us love laundry. You know what I mean? It's like one of those things, like nobody wants to do it, but we both hate that it's not done. And so we hired a nanny. Best choice in the entire world. And it's like one of those things where we're talking about earlier, like delegating and like, rather than hiring, it's so inexpensive to hire a nanny. And she literally, like every afternoon when the kids get home from school, she has like healthy snacks already prepared for them. And then throughout the day, she's doing their laundry. So much so that like, I'm a guy and I have my stack of clothes that's like, they're not dirty, but they're not clean. I don't want to put them in the drawer, but I just slip these shorts on to run out to the mailbox and then come back. And I just like toss them over in the corner. And I'm like, Bobby, don't take those. Those are not dirty. She was like, well, why are they on the floor? I was like, well, they're not clean enough to put back in the dresser. She's like, well, then they're dirty. And I'm like, dude, don't wash them. Just leave them there. That's my pile. That's my safe space of clean, dirty clothes. And she's like, no, I'm washing them. So as soon as the things hit the floor, they're washed. And it's one of those things where it's like, it took a transition, but she went back home to Ohio for like 2 weeks, like last month. And I was like,
and the rubber band stretched out.
Where'd Bobby go? Like, we got dishes in the sink. What happened here? This is not normal. But at the same time, she's teaching our kids responsibilities too, which is like good and bad. We love Bobby to death, and it's like, I feel bad. I should be the one teaching the kids to do the dishes and do all that stuff. But when Bobby says, there's dishes in the sink, they're not in the dishwasher, and the kids like hop up immediately and they're going in there, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. Like, I don't have to be the bad guy in this situation. She can be the bad guy. And it's like helped us as a family. Like now when we have a free moment, we step out of our office, we go hop on a side by side, because we live on 250 acres, but yet we never got on a side by side and rode around. And now that Miss Bobby has done the mules work, and I don't want to put that in a derogatory term at all. She's done the work that we would normally do when we had that free moment. Now, when we have a free moment, all the kids and and Julie, we can hop on side by side and ride around for a couple hours. So it's like we're buying more time, free time. And so I don't even remember what your original question was, but
that's all right. I mean, that's you just pumped her up. She sounds extremely valuable and potentially like another life coach. Part life coach.
And that's the biggest thing with our life coaches was, the expansion of the rubber band. And so that really helped us to where we can not expand that rubber band, but saying no to every other day of the week. So if it's not on Tuesday or Thursday, no networking. So like tomorrow we have a buy local lunch event that we have every month, and it's always on a Thursday. And anytime they want to do something, they'll say, hey, let's do it on a Wednesday night. You're like, that's fine, but I just won't be there. You're good with that. You're good. I mean, not that the world revolves around Tersh, but that's just how we structured it. So that way I can say no to things easier.
That makes sense.
It was a switch. Like you asked about the how fast it was. As soon, because John and Joe, they were like, you have to do this. It just has to be done. Because all of our kids play soccer too. They play travel soccer. So we're going different directions across the country. And as soon as they said, look, you're going to end up in divorce if you don't stop this. I mean, that sounds extreme, but it could lead there. It was like, okay, immediately from this day forward, no more networking events that are not on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Yeah. And I've heard you talk about that, and that part makes sense. But I guess for me, one of my struggles is like internally, just how, and a lot of it revolves around work, but I'm constantly just problem solving and thinking and brainstorming. Do you find yourself like, now that you've structured your week and your days and your time, like if it's not on like if you start thinking about podcasting, it's not on a podcast day, do you keep a lot of notes, or do you put it to the side, or?
Yeah, I use the note app on my phone.
Yeah.
I use that a lot. We have OneDrive, so we use Microsoft 365, and we have OneNote, and I'll add a lot of notes there. A lot of these notes from the podcast automatically will upload to OneNote also. So yeah, I typically, if I'm thinking about it, if I'm in the shower and that's when your great thoughts come to you, then it's just, all right, let's put it in the notepad real fast, and hopefully I remember it next Wednesday whenever we're going over stuff.
Have you guys made any rules around like, not talking about work, or not talking about this, or not talking about that after a certain time or on certain days?
Not a certain time. We don't take it to the bedroom. So as soon as you cross that threshold, if you want to talk work again, we got to get out of here.
Depending on what's going on with my business, and especially during times of growth, I mean, it's really hard for me to switch it off.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty much perpetual. And even if it goes away, like while I'm talking or hanging out with somebody else, like it's right back, at any moment.
That's being an entrepreneur in general.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got to be conscious of that, because a lot, there's plenty of people that aren't like that, and it'll wear other people down. I mean, even recently it's been brought to my attention that, my girlfriend brings it up all the time. It's like, it never shuts off. Mm-hmm. And I forget that I'm constantly talking about it too.
It was sometimes that way with Julie before, my wife Julie, before she got involved in the business, because she was like, you're always thinking about it. Like, you know how whenever people look at you and they're like, what are you thinking about? And you're like, oh, nothing. It's nothing, whatever. And they're like,
there's no way I'm going to tell you.
Yeah, exactly. And then they're like, really? So then it becomes like, what are you hiding from me? And or it's like, you're never here. You're always thinking about something else. And then Julie came into the business, and like instantly I seen that come over her, and she's like, wow, I didn't realize you can't turn this off. I get it now. Before we would talk, and I'm like, I just can't turn it off. It's not a switch I can flip. And then she was real bad about, like, in the bed, we were like talking and scheduling for the next day and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, whatever happened to turning it off? Like, and stuff. So I love giving her a hard time about it. And she's like, I just didn't realize how much it was always top of mind, because literally the business, as much as you delegate as much as you like, you're still thinking about things with the business, even if it's just, how do I improve the business?
Yeah, even especially if you're driven to succeed in any way. My answer to the question, what are you thinking about, for as long as I can remember, it's always been, I can't talk that fast. I just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Is there anything, like any best practices or anything, that comes to mind about coaching, training? I mean, we kind of were hitting around this earlier, but coaching, training, engaging employees, like maybe something that you've implemented, or even a personal technique that you've some rules or anything.
Oh yeah. So with us being remote, we have, the biggest thing that people ask me is like, if your guys don't come to the shop every day, how do you maintain culture?
Yeah.
How do you maintain culture remotely? And one of the biggest things for us is I have what's called the momentum gauge, and you've heard this probably a little bit, but with the momentum gauge, we use Slack as our communication platform. But so 4 times a day, we have a inside of Slack. I don't know if you can see this or not. I send out this notification it's a emoji. It's the stop sign, not stop sign, the red light, green light, yellow light sign, and I'll send it out and ask what level are you? Are you a red? Are you a green? Are you a yellow? And if it's like, see, like here you can see like this guy here was a yellow green. So we'll send him a text. This guy here is yellow. This guy here is yellow green. So they're all in a funky mood this morning,
What's red mean?
Red. And that's a good question, because in there, so every morning I send out this, which explains exactly which
the key.
One of them is. Yeah. And so that key, so 2 greens together means super green, doing great, moving forward and ready to rock. Green means doing good, still moving along. Yellow means caution, moving slow, struggling, need some help. Red, not good, need help now, upset, struggling bad. So if I ever see a red, no matter what I'm doing, I stop what I'm doing and I call that person, technician, the office person, doesn't matter. And then yellow, they get a text message right then. But they took it upon themselves to start adding the yellow green or the green yellow. That way you can see them transitioning over towards yellow. And it's not just business stuff. So I make a point there. So like the first one is at 7:30 in the morning. So that has nothing to do with work.
How they're coming into work.
How you're coming into work. How is your day starting out? We've had reds first thing in the morning because family situations the night before happened. One guy got pulled over on his way into work, and he was red because of that. And so as soon as I call them and they tell me, and I'm like, oh, is there anything I can do? And then you work through the process then. And at that point, if anybody comes to me and quits because they're unhappy, it's because they've lied in that.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I like that. I mean, my mind's been wondering, well, you've been talking about that. And I was wondering if when you implemented that, did you feel like that you got a higher level of insight into how they're doing? Because I can see it both ways. I can see a pullback because they'll never want to put a red because they don't want the attention. But I could also see that it's such you're just sending a text effectively to communicate your mood, and you might get more of that.
Yeah.
More feedback.
It is. And it's so quick. It's so instantaneous. And it's not like you have to have a full blown conversation right then. You just send back the green dot. We're good. Move along, and then you send back a yellow one. I'm going to send you a text. And that was the thing that was something I had to work out the kinks in to start off with, because one time I did respond in the group, like, hey, is there anything I can do to help? And then they were like clammed up and didn't they didn't feel like they could speak anymore because they didn't want to talk about it in front of everybody. As soon as I realized I did that, immediately took it to their personal channel, because they each have their own channel as well. And so took it there, and they explained what was going on. I was like, okay, if there's anything I can do, please let me help. And then with the red, it's never reprimand. It's never evasive. It's always like, is there anything I can do to help? Like, let's get through this process together. We had one where they were having marital issues, and I'm like, look, man, I will pay for our life coaches to talk to you. I'll give you a couple sessions of that if that'll help you. And they're like, I don't need no counselor. I'm like, look, man, I go to these guys. They are amazing people. They're life coaches. They coach you in general in life. And I'll pay for a couple sessions of that if it'll help. And they're like, oh, I appreciate that. And they know that you care, because it's like the old adage goes, it's, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's so true that's once they see how much you care, then they're willing to take a bullet for you. And my target is for us to walk into a restaurant, walk into a place of business, and nobody knows who the leader is. I want everybody to.
That's very similar to how I feel. Yeah.
So, I want everybody to take charge of every situation that they're in.
Yeah, this is to me, I feel like it's kind of unusual, but as I was building my business, I never wanted to be known as the owner, like when I was in the field, and which is, I think, strange to some people, because a lot of businesses like in our industry are built as like, I'm the face of the business.
Yeah.
But I wanted to be a tech, and even when I started hiring people, I asked them to never refer to me as boss or
As
the man,
boss, yeah.
as anyone other than I'm a good tech that works with you,
Yeah.
and we're just techs together. And I parlayed that later on into like ownership conversations about, the biggest compliment you can ever get paid is when somebody asks you if you own the business. And it doesn't take a lot to get asked that, but you have to care, and you have to have pride in your work, and et cetera, et cetera. Yep. And it's been really rewarding for me, probably more than them, when I've had techs come back to me and be like, I got asked today if I own the business, whatever. I mean, I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I love that. I love having that conversation. So
yeah, let me share. Did you come up with that on your own, or did you get the idea from someone?
It originated through CEO Warrior, and I put a spin on it myself.
Yeah.
So
okay. One of my.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say that one of my employees a few years ago, I used to pay everybody a bonus at the end of the year, which I just hadn't come up with a better way. And like, for us anyway, that's a very terrible idea, like for cash flow and other reasons. So I would just cut all these checks at the end of the year. So trying to come up with a different program for that, and really bright girl working for me. I think her husband actually worked at a golf course and brought the idea, or it came through him, through her, to us. And we have a points program where, basically anything above and beyond, whether it's behind the scenes or on a job or to each other, you're getting points. If you get customer reviews, you get points. Like, there's all kinds of things you can do to earn points. And then they go into a holding bin. And the idea was that it's a paid vacation program. So every 10 points is equal to a paid vacation, and it's structured to your, whatever your compensation package is. And then the caveat was that if you don't, want to take a vacation or whatever, like after a certain amount of time, you can just cash them out for cash value. So you can take your points in there. So it basically becomes that bonus anyway, either way you cut it.
Yeah.
And man, the programs had more value than I could have imagined. And what's best is that, we constantly, less now, but in the early days, we would get feedback all the time. Like, what do you think about this? And, it's always been really positive feedback. I mean, of course, because it's extra money, but it's just, it's gone over really well at team meetings. We've kind of gone away from this, with COVID and, having virtual meetings or not meetings at all. But technicians would allocate, we would have a time where people would award points to each other. Which is great, because it gets a conversation going about like, if you have somebody negative in the group, it's like, well, I can't think of anything or whatever, it gets these ideas, and it gets everybody's mind or eyes looking on like what types of behaviors people are noticing and that type of thing. I've really liked it. It's served us a lot of purpose.
Yeah, I love that. I have a friend of mine who bonuses his guys based on, like, they have 5 things that they have to get. They have to get 4 of the 5 each month in order to get their bonus, basically. And WOW service is part of it. So like getting a review with your name in it, like so many reviews with your names in it. And then, it's along the lines of that. But I really like how I like the thought process of the points, and talking about it with each other in your meetings. That's cool.
Yeah. It's been great. I had one of my questions here was, I was going to ask you what you did outside of work, but that was before I found out that you were a gearhead and had 4 kids. So I think that, I don't have any children, but, as you were talking earlier, I think about, just at different times, the stress and pressure for me, and like everything that's going on, and how I barely keep my head above water, like a lot of business owners. When I think about adding children into that mix, it just like blows my mind. I have a lot of admiration for anybody in the service business in general. I mean, I really do. I hate that in carpet cleaning, and I've receive this feedback from time to time, it tends to be more negative than positive. Like, I wish it was more like a fraternity. I wish people were looking out for each other. And, and I understand competition. I mean, I'm hyper competitive too, but, I think it's just a shame that more businesses in the service businesses aren't more helpful to each other. But yeah, I can't, it's hard for me to imagine putting kids into my situation a lot of the time. I mean, super respects to you and all the other business owners and employees it's just hard work. It's like, it's that's what I tell people every time we sit down to interview. I'm like, I don't want to, split hairs with you at all. This is as blue collar gets. And when I have the opportunity, I share that. That's the path that I chose. And certainly there's been times where I was like, what did I do? Why did I do this? But when there's other times where it's exactly what I needed to do. I like the grit of it. And that's one of the things that I have to, I use the word remarried sometimes, but whether it's with the business or the line of work, it can be so challenging and so difficult that occasionally I'll have to reconnect and spend some time digging back to like, hey, like what is it that really fulfills you on this level? What is it about this work? And then try and translate that to your coworkers and your employees. Those are really special moments when you connect. I've got a couple guys now that when I hear them talk, it reminds me of how I was, at that age. And it's really cool because I think it's like somewhat unusual to actually like to do labor and, work with your hands and really be driven by pushing yourself in that way. It is, to me, it's not unlike sports, which we talked about before. Did you always think you were going to be an entrepreneur or work for yourself? I should say, like, when did was there?
I don't know how I don't know how it really came about. My grandfather, he was he owned a landscape company, but other than that, my uncle, he has a very successful fencing company now, but back when I first started my business, they were just kind of starting out too. And so I didn't really have that to learn from him as being like an influence to be an entrepreneur. So nobody in my family really was an entrepreneur. My grandfather, if anything, he said, don't do it. Don't do it. Just stay doing what you're doing,
But was that based in like the security of?
Yes. Well, he was at retirement age. And so it was like, I have to now work because he didn't invest his money. He was sold on Social Security, like that age group, they were just sold that Social Security is going to take care of everything. And, he was at the age where he was like, I'm old enough to get Social Security, but I'm not getting enough Social Security to maintain my lifestyle. So I'm still having to work, and so he was working well past the age of, Social Security. And so he was always like, don't do it. Just work for somebody else and get you a retirement and that type of stuff. And I was like, yeah, no. And then once I did it, once he's seen the passion in it, and he was like, okay, yeah. He would always ask me, how's it going? Are y'all busy? How many employees do you have? How many trucks do you have? Like that was always what he asked. First thing he'd asked when he seen me, it was, so how many guys you got now? How's it going? How's your profit numbers? What's your percentages, your margins and stuff? And I'm like, so I always had that conversation with him, and it's not something that you could really connect with anybody else. You go to a family reunion and nobody knows what you're dealing with as an entrepreneur. And you hate to be that way. You hate to be like, you don't know what I'm dealing with. So let's don't even have this conversation. And, but at the same time, it's like, I could spend a couple hours and educate you, or we can just have meaningless small talk.
I can tell you it has ups and downs.
Yeah. But yeah, so, no, I didn't. I grew up thinking, knowing I was going to be an engineer, went to school for engineering. And in high school, I was in the GTREP program. So my junior and senior year of high school, mainly my senior year of high school, the whole time I was dual enrollment. So I was taking Georgia Tech engineering classes or core classes at that time, and getting high school credits for it at the same time. So I mean, I went to college for engineering, and I knew that like I was like, that's just what I was going to be as an engineer. And then didn't do anything with engineering at all, got out and joined the Air Force.
Were there other jobs in between that point in time and like you working for, was it Fred's company, HVAC company or?
HVAC company? Yeah. Yes,
I mean, was there other jobs and stuff?
Yeah. So I worked at a chemical plant in town, and following that career path of, engineering, hated it with a passion, despised it. I worked there about a year. I was also in the Air Guards, the Air National Guard, and worked there full time for a couple of years, and did, a couple of years worth of trainings also. And I did that right after high school. And so eventually a friend of mine he worked for Kennedy's, and he was a car buddy of mine, and I was like, hey, can you get me a job? He was like, I can get you an interview. I was like, all right, cool. So he got me an interview, and I was hired. And then that guy actually quit like 2 weeks later from there. I was like, well then, okay. So,
and that's where you were until you.
Yeah. Yep. That was the only place I worked until I started my business.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Well, it's nice to meet you. I really like what you're doing, Tersh. I mean, I think your personality is really easy. I mean, it's worn on your sleeve. You're just really down to earth. Yeah. And I think people can sense that. I think, we live in a time, obviously, where you can't get too much of good information. And I've enjoyed listening to your podcast. Thanks for having me on. Let me ask you some questions. I just think it's hopefully give, a few minutes to gain some insight about the person behind the show or behind the business or whatever. So,
yeah, man, I appreciate you coming on and doing a little twist to it. So, this episode is a lot longer than what we normally do, and I don't mind that at all. I like that. And we'll share it. And,
I intentionally didn't have a clock near me, so I have no idea what time it is, really. We have been talking a while.
We've been talking for 2 hours and 22 minutes.
Wow.
That's hilarious. And it's not uncommon. Like I said, last week I was out in St. Louis, and, 12, 14, 16 hours, it passed by like in a flash.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I never get tired of talking shop, it's just, business ownership is more or less a fraternity.
Yeah.
I mean, it can be I was thinking about this a few minutes ago when you're talking, it can be a very lonely place,
very much so.
And I try not to get, fall down into that hole, because it gets really dark down there. But, it's just a different feeling. I mean, it's a lot of responsibility, and the reward, you have to seek your own, but very, very rarely does anybody come up and pat me on the back and be like, you did a good job, or thanks for this job, or thanks for doing this or that. And I live so far below my means in large parts so that I can do everything I can to make sure that my employees have a good place to work and, nice equipment, the list goes on. But yeah, I love talking shop. So I've really enjoyed talking to you. It's nice meeting you.
I appreciate it. Anybody that's watching this, huge shout out to you. Thanks for sticking to the end. And I'm sure you've enjoyed this too. I mean, I've enjoyed, learning about Wesley and sharing our backstory. But if you have any questions for me, Tersh at serviceemperor.com, learn more, carpetprocleaners.com, learn more about Wesley. And thank you for watching or listening to the Service Business Mastery podcast. It is a podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. And I say that from the bottom of my heart. Like I said in this interview, this was my way of giving back. This is my way of giving back to an industry that is giving us so much. And I hope that that's been conveyed in this episode. And if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us. We both obviously love talking shop. But
yeah, and I'll in the off chance that anyone needs or would like to email me, it's info@carpetprocleaners.com or stonewesley@gmail.com. And I just want to add to what you just said and say that I can't imagine anyone being a bigger quote unquote technician advocate, just an advocate of people in the service business. Like I have my opinions about this or that, but I have a lot of respect for anybody that's doing this and people coming up. I wish we had podcasts like yours, when I was in any of the times that I'd started my businesses. I mean, there's so much information. I mean, I've been doing this a while, so I know a lot about it, but I can imagine, the resources available for somebody young, whether they're a tech or a manager or thinking about starting their business or one day will.
And it's free. That's the best part about it.
Yeah.
Whenever I first started listening to podcasts, it was because I was listening to books on tape, and then I kind of just ran out of books on tape to listen to. And so I started listening to podcasts, and, they didn't have podcasts like this whenever I started listening to them. And so that was, one of the main reasons why I really wanted to start it. And so, huge shout out, but it is free. So the only thing it could cost you is just share it with one of your friends. And so,
you haven't told them that you're about to start charging $30 an episode.
Yeah, we'll keep that under the radar.
Yeah.